Hi, my name is Beth and I'm a programming assistant for the St. Johns County Public Library System. I'm here at the St. Augustine Lighthouse Park to meet with Emily Jane Murray of the Florida Public Archaeology Network. This is Florida Archaeology Month, and we are also celebrating throughout 2021 St. Johns County's 200th anniversary. So we are celebrating all year long our rich history and cultural heritage from our county. So I'm here to meet with Emily Jane Murray, and she is going to be talking about the Heritage Monitoring Scouts. You know, this lighthouse behind me that you see today was built between 1871 and 1874, but it's not the original lighthouse for St. Augustine. In fact, Florida's first lighthouse was here, but over by the beach. And already in the 19th century, they were already noticing beach erosion and were worried about if that lighthouse would last. So they started building this lighthouse instead. And by 1880, the original lighthouse had fallen into the ocean. So Emily Jane is going to be telling us about the Heritage Monitoring Scouts, which is a program that you, the public, can get involved with. And it's a way to monitor archaeological sites that are at risk, especially from climate change. So let's go ahead and meet Emily Jane Murray. Hi, Emily Jane. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Certainly. So my name is Emily Jane Murray, and I'm a public archaeologist who works with the Florida Public Archaeology Network. So we're a statewide nonprofit that works to help protect and promote Florida's buried past. So we do a lot of education and outreach, but we also assist local governments and assist the State Division of Historic Resources with different programs and workshops and trainings. So the program I wanted to talk with folks about today is actually our Heritage Monitoring Scout program. So this is a program that we do to get citizen scientists. So anyone who wants to come out and help can be a citizen scientist, and we go and we monitor archaeological sites, historic cemeteries, structures, and look at the impacts and threats that we're seeing, both ongoing issues, but also thinking forward towards things like climate change impacts, so sea level rise, erosion, bigger issues that we're going to see. And our basic goal is to kind of collect data about these sites, and then that can help us kind of plan for the future and decide, you know, which sites are really being impacted and do we need to come back and revisit, and which sites are okay and we can not worry about them for the next few years and come back and revisit them. So one of the things that we're really looking at is sea level rise, because it's going to have a huge impact on all of Florida, all of the places. But thinking about heritage sites and archaeological sites, you know, we have a ton here in St. Augustine. We're over here on Anastasia Island, near Salt Run, near the new St. Augustine Lighthouse. And we're actually going to go take a walk and look at the old St. Augustine Lighthouse, and you'll see it's already underwater. It's already been affected. So we've kind of created some models, and we've thought about what could affect archaeological sites. So this is what our current water levels look like, and when we add 3 feet, which is a pretty likely scenario, you see a lot of Davis Shores is underwater. A lot of the area starts cutting in, and it just gets even worse with 6 feet. There's no more land left. So we see, you know, maybe the actual lighthouse would still be standing, but you can no longer get to the lighthouse from downtown St. Augustine, or you're going to be swimming through downtown St. Augustine as well. So thinking about, you know, how the water is going to affect the sites, but also how it's going to affect the access to the sites. You know, can we continue using them and enjoying them as tourist attractions or as places to visit and learn about our past? And Salt Run's a really interesting place, because this is the original inlet to the original entrance to the, you know, our channel is kind of up here now, north of St. Augustine a little bit, but it used to be down here at Salt Run, and you'd have to kind of thread this needle and come up and around. And this whole Conch Island area just wasn't even there until we started the dredging in the inlet up here, and that's kind of changed the area, and so we've had a lot of sand building up here. So we've seen a lot of changes to this area already, and we've seen, you know, this was the beachfront community where we are now, and now it's on, you know, a kind of intertidal area instead. And so that's one of the reasons that the lighthouse is here. It doesn't quite make sense because it's not really near the inlet, but it once was. And the old lighthouse was literally just on the beach, and it goes back even to the colonial period. It was a big coquina tower that was constructed, and it was abandoned in the early 1800s because it was literally just falling into the ocean.
Oh wow!
So, but it had a really cool long use as a lighthouse. It was probably one of the oldest lighthouses here. Even before it had fancy electric lights, it was just had a flame on top of it and was kind of used as a sentry post. And the Spanish actually had posts like that up and down the coast where they could kind of communicate and talk about what was going on in the area.
That's so cool.
So why monitor sites is a great question we get, and this is one of our favorite sites to visit, and you can see very clearly why we monitor. So this was our first efforts. We went in 2016, just before Matthew, and we didn't realize Matthew was coming. And we came back after Matthew, and you can just see how the shoreline was affected. There's this well that's in this fence line, and it's now just totally exposed. The tide has changed at the site as well, so you can see these are more or less low tide, but at high tide, the high tide mark was still, relatively kind of low on the bank. You can see that the rocks, kind of the tide line on the rocks here, that these were exposed, and now a lot of them are just underwater completely. And this is Shell Bluff Landing. It's a 6,000-year-old shellman, and then we see people built a plantation there in the second Spanish period. There was a Spanish mission there in the first Spanish period. Governor Grant, who was the first governor of Florida, had a plantation on the Guana Peninsula. So it's up in the DTM Research Reserve today, and a lot of folks can go and visit and check it out. But it's important, to track these changes. We see changes at site through time, but it's really important to kind of record who was the last person there and to take these photos to have the dates to know, when some changes might have occurred. So we've gone out and we were trying to figure out, when did the cedar tree start falling? And we're like, oh, the cedar tree was falling from the first day we were out there. So that wasn't just, quite a storm impact. So just kind of being able to figure out changes like that. Every time we go out, we find artifacts that are eroding away as well. So we're able to photograph the artifacts. We leave them all in place. It is state land, so we don't have a permit to collect any of those artifacts. But even photographing them, we're able to create like an assemblage of artifacts that we can then start to talk about who lived at the site and what they were doing and what was going on. And that really builds the information that we're collecting about the site as well. And this is just one other kind of factor that we can plug into. The GTM Research Reserve does a lot of research on climate change and sea level rise and how the peninsula is moving around. So this is kind of one other point of data. So they're collecting a lot of environmental data, but this is one other point of data that they can plug in and kind of think about big picture issues as well.
Wow, seems like very, very important work.
Yes. And we're seeing a lot of kind of ongoing erosion. So this site's being impacted because it's right on the intercoastal waterway. So that whole landscape's been changed a lot. We have a lot of boat wake action. So we're seeing ongoing issues, but places like Louisiana are already losing a football field worth of land a day. So it's definitely a mad rush to get out there and deal with some of those sites. But, to think kind of bigger picture, so we have coastal sites that may be impacted, but then we also have to think about if we have to move Miami. If Miami's going to be underwater and we have to move all of those people, where are they going to go? Right. And are they going to move to places where it might impact, resources that are there? Are they going to put up a new housing development where there was a site? So kind of really thinking more broadly about some of the impacts that we may see to sites.
Big changes. What kind of tools do you use to do your work?
Yeah, so at the basic level, we use the most important tool in archaeological research, and that's a pencil, right? Because if we're not recording the information that we're, especially when we're actually excavating, it's such a destructive process. If we're not, recording what we're doing while we're excavating, we're losing that information. We're not doing science, as I say to the kids. We're just digging holes. But for monitoring, it's also an important tool to record what we're seeing. So we have a pretty simple monitoring form that we fill out, and we collect some pretty basic information about who you are and where you are and when it is, and so that can help us figure out the last time somebody was there and who was there. So if we notice changes, we can go back and ask. Trying to figure out if the site's in the correct location, and this is a really big one. The largest mound on the East Coast is Turtle mound, and it's in a national park. It's in Canaveral National Seashore. It was mapped in the incorrect spot in the state's database of sites. So we can do all of the modeling. We can try to figure out all of the ways that the site may be impacted. But if we don't have the dot on the map in that right spot, it doesn't really matter, and that's not helpful. And that's a pretty big site. It's a pretty noticeable site. It's well taken care of by the national park, but it was just in the wrong spot. So we see a lot of that. So trying to figure out if the sites are in the right spot, some of these sites we're revisiting for the first time in 50 years. So that's, a lot of changed with mapping technology since then. An overall site condition, just to see, does this site look good? Is it starting to decline? Is it unstable? Do we need to come out and do something? And then noting the threats that we observe. And this is important, what are you actually seeing happening? So we can, maybe think that it's going to flood, but it might not be flooding, or we maybe can think that, it may be affected by wave action, but maybe it's not. So noting the things that you're seeing on the ground on that day is really important data to collect. We then also get information about what artifacts are visible. So, if you see an artifact on the surface, we all want to go and pick it up and look at it, but we do try to photograph them in place, because that also gives us an idea, are the artifacts coming from one place in the site versus another, some context information there. So photographing them in place and, making note of what they are. And if you can identify them down to, a 1963 Coca-Cola bottle base, that's awesome. And if you're like, it's a bottle base, I'm just going to take a photo. Like, there are experts in glass bottle bases that we can get to look at it. And then just, we have a spot where you can write anything that you may see that's going on. If you're there after a hurricane, if, new developments happening, if something else is going on. Just to describe what you see. And then recording the site priority, and this is kind of an interesting one because, as a citizen science program, we're also trying to get information from people about what sites are important to them, and what sites they want to see protected. And, if we got $1 million to go do archaeology at some of these sites, what sites do people want us to go learn more about? Right. So giving it a high, medium, or low priority. And then if we have recommendations, do we need to come back out more often? Is there something pressing that's happening at the site that we need to deal with? Or does it need, an update in this state database? Is it in the wrong location? Is it wrong information that was recorded? So getting that, noting if we need to do any more updating of the things. And then taking some photos. And photos can be really important. I was showing the images of Shell Bluff Landing because that can give us, a sense of what the site looked like the last time somebody was there. It's also helpful in trying to figure out where the site is the next time somebody goes. I've been out to a lot of sites and they describe what it is, and I'm like, well, it'd be cool if you had a photo so I could figure out if I'm here or not. So just kind of, documenting with photographs can be important. So we do have some other cool tools that we've been using. This is my fancy science hat, as I like to call it. But what this is there is a GNSS receiver in here. So what it does is it takes the location that my cell phone, where it thinks I am, and it boosts the signal. It gets a whole bunch of other satellites, and it can get more precise information about where I am. And so this can be helpful. So we've done a lot of shoreline mapping. We've, if we find artifacts, we can give it a specific place where we are. Once again, to think about if artifacts are appearing in one location and a site versus another. And then also if we are the site's in the wrong spot, it helps us collect information to update those documents. So we can see we're sitting in lovely Lighthouse Park here. So there's our little blue dot. And then here's the site of the old St. Augustine Lighthouse. And we can see it's pretty much already recorded underwater. Wow. So we'll take a walk out there and see what we can see at high tide. But it's kind of over, well, that's a wrecked. It's kind of over here.
Gotcha.
You can kind of see it on the aerials. So maybe that's a good sign that we need to update. Yep. But that's not quite where it is. We're at the site of the old lighthouse, and it's actually over here underwater currently. It's high tide today in Salt Run. But you can kind of see there's some vegetation over there, and it's actually growing around the site because the site is in a breakwater basically for the wave action, so it kind of gives the vegetation a nice area that it can grow a little easier in. But this was the original beach, so Conch Island, which is across the way, was not there before we opened a new inlet to St. Augustine, which was down here. This was the original inlet, so people would come actually from the south, and they would have to kind of thread the needle in between these breakers, which were basically sandbars, and then come up this channel. So the lighthouse was here to kind of help guide them, and one of those breakers is now Conch Island, actually. And then they would kind of cut around where Davis Shores is, and then you can see the Castillo cruising on in as you would today. This was never a great channel because it was never very deep. It silted in a lot, and there's a lot of stories about, you know, it closing up and reopening and closing up and reopening. So it was a wise choice for logistical to cut a deeper channel, and that happened in like the 40s with the U.S. Army Corps. But there's lots of really cool sites out here that kind of tell the story of this changing environment, and you know, we have a lot of groins that were actually some of the earliest erosional control efforts that were put in by the Army Corps of Engineers in the late 1800s, and they're just big coquina structures that were supposed to help stop erosion of the beach here. And as I say, the lighthouse stood here, and it goes back, there was some sort of structure here even in the first Spanish period, and it kind of grew and grew, and then they added a light to the top of it, and so it was, in some ways, it's one of the earliest lighthouses that we have in North America, which is kind of exciting. And then, of course, our beautiful lighthouse today was built in the 1800s, and a little further inland, a little safer. It's not quite going to fall into the ocean like this one did. So this is one of the sites that we come out and keep an eye on because we know it's in a pretty active environment, and we're seeing a lot of changes that are happening, and so we like to come out and take some photos of it. And recently the Lighthouse Archaeological Maritime Program at the St. Augustine Lighthouse got some field school students out, and they remapped the whole site and did a little more research on it.
So I had to sneak back over here and just take a look at it during low tide. So there's where the foundational stones are. It's really beautiful out right now.
So we are always looking for volunteers for the Heritage Monitoring Scouts program. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can go to our website, fpan.us/HMS Florida, and you can fill out a scout application, and that gets you on the email list so you can learn about upcoming workshops and upcoming monitoring events that we're doing. And then you can head out and start taking a look at some of these sites yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Emily Jane. The work you're doing is so important, and we are so glad that you shared your time with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us today. I learned so much from Emily Jane Murray and the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and I hope that you are interested in learning more about the Heritage Monitoring Scouts. If you're interested in learning more about archaeology or about St. Johns County's long history, or St. Augustine's history, the lighthouse here, we have all kinds of resources in the St. Johns County Public Library System. So you can visit our website, www.sjcpls.org. And also please stay tuned to our Facebook page and YouTube channel for more great programming for adults, teens, and children. Thanks again so much, and we'll see you soon at the library. Bye-bye.